One of the principles of my analog and digital external mind is the importance of structure, how critical it is that the primary notes of our personal knowledge management system are stored within relation to all the other notes within that system, how important hierarchy is. So in this video, I'm going to show what that hierarchy looks like, what I think it enables in terms of understanding and thinking development, as well as some things to be on the lookout for when trying to design it within your own system. So let's dive in and take a look. So what does hierarchical structure, hierarchy look like within your external mind? And really the way I think about this is it looks like a bird's eye view of your tree of knowledge. So if I go to my personal knowledge management page and I take a look at how my notes are structured with the MindMark plugin, then you can see this tree-like structure emerge from the notes. There are notes with siblings, with parents, children, grandparents. Each note exists within this branching structure of a storage system, and I can see how different notes relate to each other. So when I'm talking about a hierarchical structure, this is what I'm referring to. So what makes this different than your typical kind of folder structure? Now, a lot of the information I got here and these quotes that I have on screen come from a paper by Johannes Schmidt that he wrote about Niklas Luhmann's Zettelkasten system. So there's a couple key things here. One, there are no privileged positions within this web of notes. So it isn't as though the notes that are higher up or the notes that are lower down are more or less important than the other. Really what this hierarchy is showcasing is not one of importance or relevance. It is one of relationship, and that is the other thing you want to keep in mind with this structure, is that the notes only need to have some relationship to the previous entry when you're installing the new ones. Rather than trying to create something with this overarching perfect system, you really want to go based on relationships. And so what that can end up having happen is you can have a sequence of notes that lead farther and farther away from the initial subject. So if we take a look at my personal knowledge management, I can show you exactly what this looks like. So if we zoom in here, you can see that I started talking about focusing on developing our knowledge over managing it. I then talked about tools for thought, how they should really enable our thinking to develop, and how that can come about through the discourse between ideas. And then I started thinking about how hierarchical structure for storing our main notes can really enable this discourse. And then that led down the rabbit hole to all these notes about the hierarchy and storage of our notes. So this ended up coming underneath this topic about development over management. So you can see how as your thinking develops, you will get further and further away from the grandparent, the great-grandparent note that you initially set up. But that is okay. You don't want to try and fit everything within the perfect bucket for your notes. You just want them to develop based on how your thinking grows over time. So what do I think the hierarchy enables? Because putting all these notes within this system, giving them these dedicated IDs, that takes effort. So what is the value that I think I get out of this versus just creating a new note, tagging it, creating a new note, tagging it, and moving on? The first, I think, is it encourages discourse for your ideas and helps prevent them from becoming siloed or having diverging thoughts. Because when your notes have a home, then they can argue with their parents, they can fight with their siblings, and then they can really raise their children. They need a place where they can be brought close to similar ideas, and then you can use that proximity to really have a conversation between the notes as you're reviewing them to develop your ideas, rather than having the same idea over and over again in different parts of your system. So this is where having defined locations enables that discourse for development rather than just managing your knowledge. So the second thing that I think it enables is really enabling learning. You're going to have to continually review your notes during the installation process, because if you want to add a new note, you can't simply tag it and move on. You have to go through your system and think about what other notes this is most closely related to, because that's where you're going to install it within the system. And also a quote from this paper by Schmidt, talking about how the usefulness of a note can only be made in relating it to old notes, other notes within your system. So when you're going to install, you might have to go through a few different sections. You're reviewing the previous notes that you have seen. You're relating it to what you already know. So you're really developing that learning within the context of the other notes within your system, which I think is very important and very valuable to be doing. Another thing that I want to highlight, that this structure is not just something that you create and move around and then move around again. In my time of creating personal knowledge management systems, the number of times I have organized, reorganized, reordered my notes has just been staggering. And I spent so much time just managing my notes rather than developing my thinking. So this is where having a fixed structure, which I think is also really enabled by having analog components, because when you give these notes a static ID and you're writing that on a piece of paper, you are much less inclined to go back in and change all those addresses on the notes. So you can focus more forward on developing new notes and ideas rather than going back and just reordering and reorganizing your old notes. So when you have a structure, you spend less time moving things around and more times relating new information to the old information. There are a few things that you want to avoid when designing and building this hierarchy within your own system. One is to really not try and create an overly structured system that you are going to try and fit everything neatly into these different buckets. Like I talked about how your notes will evolve as you get further and further away from that primary subject. You want to allow that to happen versus thinking that this needs to fit within a certain bucket. So always be forward looking rather than trying to stick to something that you created in the beginning, because you don't know all the things you're going to know when you first start out. You don't know how the information that you gain is going to be developed into knowledge and understanding. So you can't create something in the beginning that is going to be perfect. You want to create this rough structure and then allow things to grow from there. The analogy that I think about is you're really just trying to plant a seed and grow a tree. You're not trying to build one out of sticks. You're trying to grow this naturally and organically over time. So that is a summary of why I think structure is so important for our external mind. If you want to do a little bit more reading, you can check the description down below. I'll put a link to the paper by Schmidt about Niklas Luhmann's Zettelkasten system, as well as an article that I wrote over on Medium about why a web of knowledge needs some supporting structure. Let me know how you structure your own systems to enable the development of your thinking. I would love to hear about how you accomplish that. And that's all for this video. I will see you all next time.